I thank you very much for this lovely introduction, for joining you once again, and for the fantastic efforts that you are all making on behalf of justice and in solidarity, not only with the Palestinian people and other oppressed nations in the Middle East, but also with all oppressed people all over the world. This is essentially one fight that cannot be divided between Gaza and Iran and Yemen and Mali. It's essentially the same fight for against injustice, and if we prevail, all of us will prevail at the same time. Um, it is rare that we speak with confidence about this issue. I mean, this is the first time I would say in the history of the Palestinian intellectual movement in which we are not perceived to be at the receiving end of Zionist brutality and cruelty and US-led imperialist savagery, but rather we are in a position where we can actually finally say what we have always been saying, that we are people with agency. We are people who are able to influence and, inshallah, hopefully very soon, even determine political outcomes within Palestine and outside Palestine. And who would have guessed that this tiny little Gaza Strip? I mean, I was born and raised in Gaza, in a refugee camp called Nusayrat, which is now associated with numerous, quite often daily massacres, but also with the tenacity and stubbornness of the Palestinian refugees, who are the descendants of the Fallahim, the refugees of Palestine 1948, resulting from the catastrophic destruction of the Palestinian homeland that we call al-Nakba. Who would have ever thought, and definitely I would have not, as a young, idealist socialist growing up in Gaza, would have thought that Gaza could indeed become at the epicenter of the world's geopolitical changes. And you can't blame us, and you can't blame yourself, because it goes against all anti-colonial theories. We have no natural resources. Yeah, they talk about that we have some gas at the Mediterranean. And, sometimes we get excited about certain ideas, and you have some magazine publish the wealth of gas at the Gaza coast, but it really is not about gas. It's not even about territorial expansion. How big is Gaza? 181 square miles if you live in North America, and 365 square kilometers if you live in the rest of the world. It's a very, very small piece of land that there is really very little room for people to even expand naturally within Gaza. And now they are all more or less being crammed into about 30% of the total size of that extremely small piece of land. So even the theory of colonial expansion, territorial expansion, doesn't even apply here. So what is going on exactly? Let me just start from the question that is being asked, and if you could kindly help me keep track of time, because sometimes I just wander off and I don't know how to find my way back. So let's just start with the initial question: will anything change now that Trump administration is in power? And I would say, honestly, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter simply because the outcomes, the changes, the events that are shaping the Middle East are created by the people of the Middle East themselves. Gazans first, but you can't discount the Lebanese, you can't discount the Yemenis, you can't discount the Iranians. They are all part of this, and hopefully this this circle of solidarity, this circle of self-assertion and collective agency is going to keep on growing. But the initiative was taken by these forces, not the other way around. And that's very, very important. It's important because it helps us understand that there are so many myths here that would have to be demolished or have to be challenged in order for us to determine what are the possible outcomes and what are the possible scenarios. Um, let's look just number one at the myth of the Israeli civilization or the Zionist Western civilization versus Arab, Palestinian, Asian, Muslim barbarity, or barbarism, as it was coined by Theodor Herzl, the founder of modern Zionism. The Israelis have, or the Zionists have always positioned themselves as kind of an extension of Western civilization into the Middle East. And in the process of doing so, they have managed to, well, make the desert bloom. That's one of them. But also this beacon of civilization, rampant, described as part of a rampart of Europe, against Europe against Asia, described by Herzl as the outpost of barbarism in the world. And now I don't know if we actually need an argument to actually argue that the opposite has proven to be true. And I don't know if there is any human being with true conscience and a sense of reason would look at what Israel has done in Gaza, and the way that the degree of dignity and resistance and resolve and humanity and spirituality and faith that Palestinians have responded to this barbarity would actually argue that Zionism stands for as a beacon of civilization as opposed to the Asian barbarism of the Palestinians. I think that myth has been shattered. Anyone who was paying attention, of course, would have realized that this myth should have been shattered a long time ago, but a lot of people were not paying attention, and now that they do, now that they have, I think the conversation regarding this issue of what is the representation of the Zionist versus the Palestinian as a representative of Asia, I think this myth has been shattered. Then the myth of Fortress Israel, this idea that Israel is this powerful platform of technological military know-how, impenetrable by any definitions. And this so-called villa in the jungle, as was called by Ehud Barak, a former Israeli prime minister, and sadly repeated by the former head of the European, I think the European Commission, describing Europe as a as a villa in the jungle, as opposed, against the expansionism of Russia and so forth. This idea, this Western racist notion that no matter what they do, somehow they are racially, culturally, civilizationally superior. And it's us, the barbaric Arab and Muslim and Palestinian and Russian and Chinese, and it's kind of trying to climb the wall of this villa, of this fortress, and trying to kind of ruin this romantic dream that the West has built for itself. And part of this is not only racist, because that's kind of quite obvious, but also the idea that we are incapable of fighting back. We are incapable of devising the means that would allow us to overcome this superior technological advancements, which has been promoted by the like of Jabotinsky in, the Iron Wall that they wanted to build around Israel. And by the Iron Wall, he wasn't actually talking about a real wall, but about the idea of pushing the Palestinian Arab population out and building some sort of layers of defense around Israel and Zionism that would make it impossible for the Palestinians or anyone else to break through. That idea was promoted and sustained and financed by the Americans for decades. For example, during the Bill Clinton era, they spoke about the need to allow Israel to maintain its military edge over the Arabs. That was, in my mind, I see that as Clinton's doctrine regarding Palestine and Israel, the military edge doctrine, although he is kind of famous for the containment doctrine. But really, this idea that we need to keep feeding Israel with the kind of military power, prowess, and technology that would make it even impossible for Arabs or Israel's enemies of any kind to even think that Israel can be militarily defeated. Well, it turned out it could. You're talking about a group of people who are part of a larger collective resistance that's been shaping up and taking place in Gaza for a long time, that actually managed to inflict greater damage to the Israeli military over the course of 15, 16, 17 months, that entire traditional standing Arab armies combined. So that myth is shattered, and I think it's going to be shattered for a very long time. Also, the idea of small and besieged Israel. This whole notion that the Zionists have been promoting, that poor Israel is just kind of found itself stuck in this hostile territory, and we are just fighting for survival. Enemies are, coming from all over. Well, guess what? Number one, it's not true. If you look at the behavior of countries like Egypt and various other traditional Arab neighbors of Palestine, if they are not if they are not outright pro-Israel, they are certainly not pro-Palestine. And we have seen that while Ansarullah in Yemen, by the way, they don't appreciate the term Houthis themselves. So Ansarullah in Yemen um, have managed to create some kind of accountability by blocking, ships that are bound to for Israel from reaching the Israeli southern coast. Arabs actually conspired with the United States to ensure that Israel is being fed, that the Israeli lifestyle, they were not going to be starving by any account, like the Palestinians have been starving for the last 17, 18 months, but to ensure that their lifestyle does not change in any way. Right, so they kind of opened this trade route that goes from United Arab Emirates, so Saudi Arabia, to Jordan, all the way to Israel, to make sure that Israel is okay, while their own brethren in Gaza are starving to death. So no, Israel is not an isolated little entity, is the exact opposite here to be true. And if indeed Israel is this democratic nation that is just opting for peace and security, why this constant, relentless Israeli pressure on Israel, on the United States, to go to war against Iran? Why? Why open up that front if you indeed are opting for peace? I mean, we have all seen what happened with the US invaded Iraq in 2003. And Iraq at that time was a country that was browbeaten by sanctions. It was in a state, and I've been to Iraq just before the war, and I've seen with my own eyes the entire country was dilapidated. Not a single car in Baghdad actually did not have a broken windows or glass, because they could not even import the most basic elements to repair their cars, their hospitals, their schools, and so forth and so on. Yet, years of Iraqi resistance eventually pushed the Americans out. Obama takes his army, moves elsewhere, looking for a fight against China and the East and and South China Sea, what they called at the time the pivot to Asia. But knowing what Iraq, the destabilization that Iraq has created in the Middle East, and the creation of ISIS and other terrorist groups in that region, and we know where the funding and the support of some of these groups come from. If that was Iraq alone, imagine going against powerful Iran. Iran that is not isolated, Iran with strong, powerful allies. They are not the arms of Iran, as some mainstream and even Arab media describe them. They are not the arms of anybody. They are entities with political agency, and they are able to create their own independent strategies. But imagine the destabilization of the Middle East that would happen as a result, to the point that Tucker Carlson, the famous conservative commentator, a few days ago, tweeted on X, said that anyone who wants to go to war against Iran, or wants the US to go to war against Iran, is an enemy of the United States. And of course, he was talking about Israel. So this idea that Israel is a small country that won't be left alone to live in peace and security is complete garbage. And the reason that it is total rubbish is the fact that Israel is a settler colonial regime. By definition, You can't change who you are. You can't change your nature. If you are a settler colonial regime, it means that you have to be in a constant state of expansion, or your function in the world ceases to carry meaning. So there's some strife in Syria. There is a conflict in Syria. You find some open piece of land, whether a few meters or 25 or 100 kilometers inside Syria, you go there and you take over that territory. Any destabilization, and this is a warning to Arab regimes really who think that they are safe. I promise you, any destabilization in Jordan, in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, you are going to find Israeli Merkava tanks going there and taking over territories and creating yet more buffer zones. So Israel is not a peaceful, small, vulnerable little state trying to survive. Israel is the heart of all of these crises, and Israel is a settler colonial regime that is bent on constant and total expansion. That takes us to the myth of European democracy.
5 minutes. You have 5 more minutes.
Absolutely. The myth of European democracy. I mean, honestly, we almost bought into this. We know we have been very critical of European colonialism. We know the history of European neocolonialism and interventionism and all of that. But, we, I think many of us got fooled by this idea that salvation could eventually come from Europe, could eventually come from the West. You see, if we are able to influence their mainstream media using the right language, if we write enough letters to the editors, everything is going to be okay. And we all bought into this. Well, what happened in Gaza, or what is happening in Gaza today, is indications that Europe is very corrupt, morally, to the absolute core, that under no circumstance could have possibly been a friend, or could have possibly stood against this kind of Israeli barbarity in the Gaza Strip. Before, we thought maybe the Europeans did not really know the extent of what happened during the Nakba. The same way we quite often use excuses to, explain the genocides of Rwanda or Namibia or the Holocaust and all of that. The idea that maybe the world did not know to the extent of all these criminalities and the extent of all these crimes. But who doesn't know now? Who doesn't know? And yet, despite of everything they know, they continue to channel these very weapons that are carrying out the very genocide against the population of Gaza. Europe is not outsider to this. Europe is not a mere complicit. This is indeed a Western genocide that is led by Israel, but financed, supported, sustained, and defended by the Western conglomerate. And the proof of that is the fact that the mere expression of thought, whether on Facebook or any social media platform or in public, could actually get you arrested in the United States. When we travel, when we leave the US, we quite often leave our phones and get new phones in order for us to go across the borders, because we are scared that anything that we could be having on our person and our digital media devices could be used against us in the court of law, as if we, by the sheer criticism of the Western role in sustaining this genocide, could actually put us in the category of terrorism or any other legal excuse that could actually get us in trouble. This is European, Western, American democracy. So if anybody is still counting on a change that would happen through this corrupt, moral, legal, political entity, give up on that and invest in a different type of struggle that happens through civil society within your own country, society, community, in order for you to bring about change and to allow you to actually be part of an actual movement for change that is happening globally. And one last thing, and I know I must have exceeded my time. I also want to talk about
Not at all.
about
You
the
have a
myth
couple
of
more
this.
minutes. Yeah.
Lovely. I want to talk about the myth of disunity, that we are inherently disunited. Palestinians are disunited, Arabs are disunited, Muslims are disunited. I don't think it is so simple, and I think it is this this perpetuates the notion that the colonized man and woman is in a constant state of disarray, is unable to conjure up thoughts, to formulate any kind of meaningful action to fight colonialism. It is not true. I think everybody within the Middle East right now is entrenched behind his, her, or their own collective self-interest. There are those who are resisting and those who are not, those who are fighting back and those who are standing with the enemy. But ultimately, there is a class struggle that is going on in the Middle East right now, and everybody is looking after his own interests. Gaza is leading the struggle with a large group and growing allies that are happening from Iran to Lebanon to Yemen to elsewhere in the region. And I think that is the front that is causing this much more than a headache, but rather destabilizing the U.S. Western imperialism in our region. And this is really where the struggle is at right now. Netanyahu, this is not about Netanyahu does not want to relent because he's afraid that his government does not have a chance of surviving if he lets go of the war. I think there's more to it than that. If Israel is defeated in Gaza, and by defeated I mean is unable to achieve its colonial objectives in Gaza, and by extension, the allies of Gaza in the Middle East claim any kind of victory, it is the day that it will be recognized that Zionism has failed not only as an ideology, but also as a function, as a settler colonial ideological function. And the moment that happens, I think we could indeed be talking about what Ilan Pape refers to as the last chapter for Zionism and for Israel as well.
I'm Michael Hudson. I'm appearing here for the International Manifesto Group. If you like this video and ones like it, please subscribe. For more information, go to the address on the screen.